Welcome back to the channel, everyone. It is I, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor. We got so much going on. It's hard to keep up with things. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Right now, as we speak, it seems that Iran's Supreme Leader, Khamenei, has vanished. Their nuclear program lies in ruins, and we're getting reports that the regime may be on the verge of collapse. I mean, it doesn't seem to get a lot worse for Iran if these reports are accurate. It's certainly suffering. The regime is suffering from significant strain, both from within and from without. Let's start with an assessment of what Trump has actually accomplished here since the bombing. So Trump accomplished, in effect, he robbed the world's leading state sponsor of terror of its biggest bargaining chip literally overnight. So as you know, 7 B-2 bombers flew 6,000 miles from Missouri, ended up dropping 14 bunker-busting bombs, 30,000 pounds each, on Iran's Fordo nuclear site. This is the same time the U.S. Navy submarines launched cruise missiles at other key nuclear facilities in Natanz and Isfahan. And Trump's goal was simple. He had no interest in regime change. He had no interest in a ground invasion, no interest in tanks or troops. Just one thing: neutralize Iran's nuclear capabilities. Now, what's so key here is that, by contrast, if you think about it, for decades, with the sole exception, it seems, of Operation Desert Storm, but for decades, every time an American president intervened militarily in the Middle East, the outcome was always disastrous. I mean, you think of Carter's failed rescue mission 1980, Bush Jr.'s disastrous Iraq campaign predicated on non-existing WMDs, Obama's Libya disaster, Biden's chaotic, cataclysmic exit from Kabul. Again, I think, in fairness now, this is what the MAGA faithful, who were so upset with Trump, like Tucker, who were so vocal on X, saying that Trump basically betrayed us. He's become, Lindsey Graham 2.0, whatever. This is what they were really upset about. This is what they were concerned about, and rightly so. Every time it looks like we're about to clean things up here at home, we end up embroiled in the Middle East in another failed military conflict. But this time, with Operation Midnight Hammer, Trump's strike was focused, it was surgical, and by all accounts, it was spectacularly effective. Iran's only real international negotiating chip was its nuclear program. That was it. That was the only leverage ultimately that Iran had. Not even its oil. I mean, China was sucking up, as I understand, about 80% of its oil. So its oil supply. So its only leverage was this nuclear program, and that has now been obliterated. And then you add to that the fact that Iran's regime has spent 50 years and nearly $1 trillion propping up terror groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, most recently the Houthis in Yemen, and they've all largely been defanged by Israeli forces. Moreover, you add to that another $1 trillion lost in sanctions and embargoes, just the economic hardships of Iran. And so this is the brilliance, as it were, of what Trump just did there, in terms of, you can almost call it an Operation Perfect Storm. With all of these pressures mounting, he took the one last thing that Iran had to bargain with off the table. And what has that resulted in? It's resulted in them being forced to the negotiation table precisely because the only thing left to negotiate is the regime's own survival. And that survival is being strained both internally and externally. So internally, you've got the growing sense of a leadership vacuum crisis that's happening. So Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, he's been missing now for over a week. hiding in underground bunkers while communicating only through trusted intermediaries. The 86-year-old leader has reportedly named 3 potential successors and prepared an entire replacement chain of command, indicating he believes that his death may indeed be imminent. So at one level, you could see that as strategic planning. But obviously at another level, you could see that as regime panic. It's the recognition that the regime at its highest level may end up toppling. So that's the first thing. Secondly, there are what appear to be internal coup dynamics. So there are reports that multiple high-ranking Iranian officials are plotting to sideline Khamenei and negotiate directly with the United States. Again, the key here is that these aren't external dissidents. These are rather businessmen. These are military figures. These are relatives of senior clerics that are all actively seeking some kind of regime change from within, at least a different faction within the regime taking over, as it were. And we're already getting a sense of the breakdown in Iran's command structure. So we reported this over the weekend when Turkish President Erdogan attempted to arrange U.S.-Iran negotiations in Istanbul. This was late last week. The effort collapsed because Iranian officials couldn't reach Khamenei for approval. Again, so the communication chain broke down. He was held up in a secret bunker and was unreachable. I mean, Trump claims he and the U.S. military know exactly where he is, but apparently members of the Iranian command structure don't. So it does appear to represent an unprecedented dysfunction at the highest levels of Iranian governance. Now, at the same time, we're getting word from Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. He's claiming that members of the armed forces of Iran and government officials have defected to his team, and he's calling on the Iranian people to rise up, stating that the regime now is weak and near collapse, and that this is their moment. This is the people's moment. Again, add to this Iran's desperate economic situation with poverty rates skyrocketing. I mean, you really are seeing a perfect storm, as it were, for the collapse of the regime, again, both internally and externally. And so this combination of leadership crisis, economic crisis, and military dysfunction creates what historians recognize as basically pre-revolutionary conditions, where either political challengers from within or the people from without, or a combination thereof, rise up and defeat the status quo. In the meantime, the Trump administration is forcing the regime into continued defensive positions while both these internal and external pressures are mounting. Again, because of Operation Midnight Hammer, the only thing that the regime has left to negotiate is their own survival at this point. Their regional proxies have all been defanged, and their nuclear program appears decimated. Khamenei's disappearance, their nuclear program's destruction, what appears to be an internal coup plotting, all represent the convergence of a very strategic strike at the heart of the Iranian regime. And after nearly 50 years, it does appear that Donald Trump is the one who's finally getting it done. Hey, gang, if you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. When was the last time you checked on your home title? That's the legal proof you own your house. Well, if you're like me, the answer is never. But the problem is that today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document. They use a fake notary stamp. They pay a small fee with your county, and voila, that's it. Your house title's been transferred out of your name. Then they take out all kinds of loans using your equity, or even they sell your property, and you won't know it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice. That's why you need to stop what you're doing right now and find out today if you've already been a victim. Use promo code TurleyTalks, all one word, TurleyTalks, at HomeTitleLock.com to make sure your title is still in your name. You'll get a free title history report, plus a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's a 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud should happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. So go to HomeTitleLock.com now. Use promo code TurleyTalks. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code TurleyTalks.
You are the community to this president's chaos. And together, we build a future of opportunity and justice for all. Hope over fear, aspiration over anger, the promise of America for each and every American. That is what we are fighting for today.
Yeesh. Ay, ay, ay. So there you have. You just saw Randi Weingarten, the queen of the teachers' unions and one of the primary architects of the woke education disaster that's befallen our nation. Just days ago at the No Kings protest, screaming, ranting as the schools she claims to care about and represent continue to get worse and students' performances continue to tank. Just a few days after that video, she actually ended up resigning from her post at the DNC, the Democrat National Committee. She's out after 23 years of pushing her far-left agenda on our kids. Now, for those who don't know, Weingarten is the president of the American Federation of Teachers. It's a union with 1.8 million members. It's been calling the shots in public education for years now. She's a political powerhouse in the Democrat Party who's been cozy with the DNC since 2002. This woman has been a key player in turning our schools into battlegrounds for progressive activism instead of places where children learn to read, write, and think critically. Under her watch, the AFT pushed for prolonged school closures during the whole COVID fiasco, keeping kids masked and locked out of classrooms long after the science said it was safe to reopen. She's championed curriculums that prioritize critical race theory and gender identity lessons for children as young as kindergartners. Now, of course, over against basic math and reading. So why did she step down from the DNC? Well, the official story that she gave was that she's out. She's out of step with the party's leadership under the new DNC chair, Ken Martin, who, by the way, nobody knows who he is. I mean, he's the very definition of a nobody. I mean, literally nobody knows who this guy, Ken Martin, is. He's not a fundraiser. He's not, well, I digress. But in her resignation letter, she whined about the Democrats not enlarging their tent or engaging enough communities and outreach and so forth. But then ironically, just days before that resignation letter, as you just saw, Weingarten was in front and center at one of the most radical of leftist protests, proving she's more interested in political stunts than fixing our broken schools. Conservatives on X rightly lit her up with folks like Libs of TikTok, one of my favorite channels, calling her performance a meltdown and perhaps the single best ad for homeschooling. And they're not wrong. Her antics were so unhinged that even some establishment Democrats, if you can believe it, began seeing Weingarten as a liability. Now, the good news is that the woke education system that Weingarten has been propping up is starting to crumble under its own weight. Parents across America, left, right, center, it's all pre-political. They're all waking up to the fact that public schools under union control have been failing our kids for years now. And the pushback is working. Weingarten's exit from the DNC is a sign that the left's power structure is starting to fracture. Her resignation is just the beginning. The woke education system is on life support, and we've got a chance to replace it with something better, something that honors our kids, our values, and our future. Well, joining me today is someone who's been on the front lines of revitalizing the education system in America for decades now. Doug Wilson is a founding member of the Association of Classical and Christian Schools. He's a pastor and author whose insights and actionable solutions have already helped countless families reclaim their children's education. Make sure to click on the link below and check out Doug's new show, Man Rampant, on Canon Plus. Doug, welcome back. It's always an honor to have you back with us.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
It's great to be with you. So this New Kings rally where Weingarten was a key speaker, well, it was basically in my backyard. It was in Philly, but so there's some advantages of being in the chimney of Idaho as you are, but away from some of the crazy. Well, you've got your own at the University of Idaho campus, but critics are arguing that it really did backfire nationally and that it revealed how her focus is more on political stunts rather than education. I'm curious your thoughts on this whole process of delegitimization of our public schools. How do you think that kind of activism from the likes of Weingarten has eroded trust in public schools among parents just across the country?
I think that there are layers to this. I think that virtually every American institution discredited itself over the course of the last few years. But the education establishment has been doing it for decades. Yeah. They've been working at destroying their own credibility for a longer time than many of the institutions have done. 10 years ago, people wouldn't have had big complaints about the Center for Disease Control, and they wouldn't have had big complaints about the military. But now everybody's got complaints about everyone. But 30 years ago, people were concerned about education, and all the dire predictions that were made by crazed activists have all been coming true, and then some. Right. So that's one aspect of this. Another is when you look at the failure of the No Kings rally or rallies across the country. The whole vibe, what they're trying to do is we are stalwart, liberty-loving Americans. Well, that's not the Democratic Party's brand at all. Yeah. So people remember, look, weren't you the guys requiring us to get vaxxed or lose your job or mask up everywhere, or you have to stay in your basement for a year? Said the Kings. Right. Well, so they are the ones with. Someone once said that liberals are those with ideas so good they have to be mandatory. and so what they've been doing is pushing authoritarian requirements, jamming them down our throats, and then just months after that series of debacles, they organize a No Kings rally because they're protesting someone who's cutting the size and scope of government, right? And then this is applauded by someone who is an education professional. You say, well, shouldn't you read a book if you're an educational professional? Shouldn't you have some awareness of history? Don't you know what a king is? Well, actually, they don't. They don't know what a woman is. They don't know what a queen is. They don't know what a king is. They
don't know what education is. Right.
They don't know. They don't know nothing. So there used to be a bumper sticker, at least here in Idaho, like decades ago. And it was, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Mm-hmm. And someone suggested here we should have an alternative that said we did try ignorance and now it wants a raise.
And then your quote that you gave, it reminded me, I think it's probably the same vibe, obviously. The late Charles Krauthammer once said that liberals don't care what you do as long as it's mandatory, right?
Yes.
Same sort of thing. Brilliantly put. Again, I think that's one of the reasons why this just has no legs. There's no, how did Jesse Waters put it or something? There's no cultural traction for any of this. There's even with the even with I'll stretch it out into the ICE raids. Nobody's putting like Mexican flags on their Facebook posts or Instagram. So
Right.
no one's doing the no king stuff. It's just got no cultural traction. It just seems like they're reaching out. Yeah.
To go back to the old categories of classical rhetoric, where an effective rhetorician is someone who has logos, the argument, pathos, the passion, and ethos, the character.
Yeah.
Logos, pathos, and ethos. The Democrats have no ethos. They the only thing, if they said, look, if you vote for us, we'll give you more free stuff.
Right.
That's the only thing that anybody is going to believe.
Right.
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 That's the only. That's the only
right. Exactly. That's the ethos. They live and breathe that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it reminds me that George Gilder quote that said, capitalism begins with a gift. It begins with investment, where socialism begins with taking and grabbing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because all of this activism and wokeness in the classroom, it only further confirms that all education is ultimately rooted in values, in a worldview, dare I say, in religious commitments.
Yes.
And you've written and spoken extensively about the importance of biblically grounded education, precisely because religious education is unavoidable. You're going to have a religion. The question is the right one or the wrong, or a good one, a bad, however you want to phrase it. How can a return to traditional values in education, that's where we want to start, as it were. It's not so much just getting Singapore math right or something. How is going back to the foundations of education, the values education, help restore academic rigor and character formation and the like?
Yeah, I'm fond of saying that second only to worship, the education of our children is the most religious thing we do.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. Now, of course, I want to say that our theology comes at your fingertips. Everything you do is religious. But in terms of it's like self-consciously religious, we're doing this coram Deo, before the face of God, teaching your children how to think about God and man and sin and salvation and revelation, the essential, the permanent issues. That's the most sacred trust you can imagine. Yeah. And you don't want to send your kids off to some secular institution in order for them to disrupt your child's their understanding of themselves as a boy or a girl or a human being. Mom, I want to be a furry. I'd like to be a raccoon. How much? What would it take? Back in the 80s, I could make dire predictions. If we don't turn back to Christ, if we don't turn back to God, this is going to go nuts. But I don't think anybody anticipated just how nuts it would go. Isn't there a stopping point? Doesn't this cliff have a bottom somewhere? No, it's the bottomless pit. If we're going to govern ourselves without reference to God, this is education in the void. It's education in the outer darkness, which is to say, no education at all.
Right. Yeah, brilliantly put. I mean, we're seeing it we're seeing it everywhere now. Even Pete Hegseth has written about the necessity of the Christian warrior and how Christians historically make actually great soldiers, because number one, they're if they're being consistent with their Christian values, they're virtuous, they have valor, they're seeking to protect the weak and the helpless, and ultimately they're not afraid to die. So, and then he contrasts that with the woke warrior, and they're the exact opposite. They're a bunch of narcissists who'll probably, refuse to even go on the front lines, and they'll turn around and run away. So we should want these values returning and flourishing in our society, because they are the prerequisite to societal flourishing.
Yes. And education approached rightly equips the children to grow up into the kind of adults who are willing to fight. Basically, you don't grow. You're not bellicose or pugnacious because you like fighting. As Chesterton points out somewhere, you don't want people who fight because they love fighting. You want because they hate what's in front of them. You want people who fight because they love what's behind them.
Yes,
right?
yes,
They're defending something, and education is equipping a child, shaping a child's affections, their heart, their orientation, so that they have, to use Augustine's phrase, well-ordered loves, right? Their loves are structured the way they ought to be. And when you love something, you are willing to defend it. And the illustration I've used there is if a man's walking downtown, home, back to the car with his wife after a movie, and some thugs come up and start messing with her hair and take her purse and rummaging through it and manhandling her and that sort of thing. If the husband stands off to the side saying, honey, I disapprove of this entirely. I can't tell you how awful I think this is. Stern letter to follow.
Typed with fists.
Yeah. One of the things you can say about that man is that he does not love his wife.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Because if he loved her, he would fight to protect her.
That's right.
Well, we don't love our civilization the way we ought to, because we're not fighting to protect her.
Right.
Right. And so education reform is teaching children that there's something here for which you should be extremely grateful, and your gratitude should overflow into a willingness to stand between it and whatever is threatening it.
Right.
And because we've not done that, we have had vandals running through our institutions and destroying them.
Right.
It's not the Gramscian long march through the institutions. It's sort of the rampage through the institutions, the tearing pictures off the walls, punching holes in the sheetrock, and the people who are looking around, normies who are looking around nervously, thinking, "Are they allowed to do this? Why are people letting them do this?" Yeah. The real question is, why are you letting them do this? Why doesn't middle America stand up and say, enough with the nonsense?
Yes.
Done. We're done with that. As
Doug,
Pete Hegseth recently said that with regard to the Department of Defense.
Yes. Yeah, we're done. We're done with the woke dung in the King James, I believe.
Yes.
I'm curious because you've written about manhood, biblical manhood, and we are getting this is off the cuff here, but we're getting a lot of reports. On New York Post talked about it. I saw it are young men are coming back to church. Are you seeing it in your own?
Yes.
Are you seeing it? And then why? Is that part of it? Are they returning? Is there like a remythologization? Are they returning to a sort of token-esque awareness of their mission and their calling as men?
Yes. Something else I've said over the years is that to borrow a term from the environmentalists, stupidity is not sustainable.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a long-term strategy. In the long run, stupidity does not work.
Right.
And I believe that young men have been catching it in the teeth for some decades now.
Yeah.
And I think it's about the the generation of young men that are turning back to God and returning to church are saying this, the way it is out here is for the birds. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows what I am. Nobody knows what I'm supposed to do. Nobody's taught me anything. Maybe the church can help me. Now, the tragedy in this is that a number of churches are not equipped to help young men in that position. They're hungry. They're seeking. I remember years ago, a friend of mine told me that he read one of my books. I think it was Federal Husband. And his reaction to it was, now I know what I'm for. What is a man for? When God created Adam and Eve, he put Adam in the garden to tend and protect.
Yes.
That's the man's role. He is to cultivate, tend. He's to be a husbandman, and he is to be a guardian. He is to be at the door, whatever the threat is. He is to be in between that threat and his wife, in between that threat and his kids. He's the one who has to be the shield. And basically, a rough and ready definition of masculinity that I use, not the toxic kind, not bad masculinity, but actual masculinity, is the glad assumption of sacrificial responsibility. Okay. So when a man gladly assumes the appointed task of being the one who sacrifices, the one who lays down his life. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So husbands have a model to follow. Okay, Christ laid down his life for his bride. And this was the point where our first father, Adam, failed.
Right. Yes.
He didn't protect his wife from the serpent.
Yes.
And when she ate from the forbidden fruit, he followed her instead of intervening. Right. And he shouldn't have blamed her. He should have turned to the Lord and say, Lord, my wife sinned. Take me.
Yes.
The impulse ought to have been interposing. And we know that that's what he should have done, because that's what the second Adam did.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what Christ did.
Right.
Lord, Father, take me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely brilliant. I think it seems, the St. George, metaphor for manhood, Britain's or England's, no, is it? Yeah, it's Britain. England's Andrew. Yeah. There's just this St. George identity seems to be coming back. It's so interesting that it was a secular psychologist from Canada that seemed to, kind of get it out of. I mean, like, I think you've often said God writes straight lines with crooked sticks. I'd be the most crooked for sure, but it's just somebody out of nowhere that you wouldn't expect that suddenly starts galvanizing men to return to church. Maybe he'll follow at some point, but it just seems that's. I was interviewing somebody from England and talking to him about this, and I said something akin to, it looks like your flag's symbol is returning. It's you're supposed to be men who protect the women from the dragon, and that is what your meaning and your purpose is, and that certainly has been lost in Britain and here, of course, over the years, but seems to be returning.
Bringing this back to education, it's the central progressive impetus is to attract people by lowering standards.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
That's right.
We want everybody to feel included in this school, so nobody flunks out. Right. We want everybody in the whole world gets a participant ribbon.
Right.
Well, the only thing that does is teach all the kids that participant ribbons are worthless.
Right.
That's the only lesson they're learning. And so when you issue a challenge to young men, this is tough. What I'm asking you to do is tough. Not all of you are going to make it. This is a real challenge. Who's with me?
Right.
Okay. That is attractive. It's deeply attractive to the male mind.
Yes.
And of course, that male mind needs to be disciplined and taught and instructed, because it can go wrong. But basically, raising the standard, raising the bar, is the way to get more buy-in. If you have schools that raise the bar, people want to get into that school, right? people work hard to get into honors programs, and they don't work hard to get into an institution that has no standards.
Right.
So whether the standard is a masculine standard for the young boys, or a feminine standard for the young girls, or an academic standard for all the students, or a parental standard for the parents who are having kids, this is what we expect you to do for your kids. All of that is the way back. The way out of this mess that we're in. The only way out is through. And if we go through, we're only going to be able to do that by raising the bar.
Right. And I think to that end, so many parents, I mean, you're seeing this massive surge in homeschooling. We're seeing obviously in classical education, which is international now, which I love to see. All these alternatives to public education. But I'm sure there are a lot of people watching now, particularly parents, who might be reluctant to leave the public schools because private schools could be expensive. Homeschooling would generally require one parent not to be in the workforce, so they'd have to take a hit in terms of their standard of living. What advice would you give to families who they know the public school system is wrong? They're considering classical education options, but they're also concerned about these other factors.
Yeah. Don't be the guy who says, I don't want to get into the lifeboat yet because the Titanic is not all the way under. I can still see the stern sticking out of the water.
There's still a chance.
There's still a chance. Man, I alluded to this earlier.
Right.
What would it have to take?
Right.
For mandatory pole dancing electives for your daughters? What are they going to do? And what it boils down to is, look, these are your kids. Do what it takes.
Yeah.
All right. These are your kids. Do whatever it takes. Now, I think that I don't want to say that there's a sin in the Bible called having your kids in the government school, but I do believe that there is a sin in not providing your children with a biblical education, not bringing them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Right. And if you are talking to your kids' teachers in the government school, having them into your home for dinner, reviewing all the textbooks that your kids are reading, you're going to shortly discover that for all the effort you're expending to just stay current in the government schools, you could found 2 Christian schools.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Great point.
And the other thing is the government school system. If you're a parent who complains about some raunchy textbook, right, you can expect to find yourself being pilloried on the national news.
Yeah.
Okay. You can even be tackled and hauled out of a school board meeting because you're complaining about Bruno in your daughter's restroom. Right. So if you make an impact in the government schools, they're going to get you. And if you don't make any kind of an impact, why are you there?
Right.
So basically, I would just urge parents to prayerfully, thoughtfully work through the issue. I've got a couple of books. One is Excused Absence on the case for pulling your kids out of the government schools. And then my most recent book on child rearing is called Keep Your Kids. And keeping your kids is an essential part of keeping your kids, is not letting the groomers and the molesters babysit them for many hours out of the day. You simply don't want to be in that position. Keep your kids, excuse yourself, tiptoe out of there. And just to indicate how much we are dedicated to this in our congregation, we're Presbyterian and we practice infant baptism. And when the parents bring their child to be baptized, and it's like we have a burgeoning population, so there's usually a baptism or 2 every week.
Mhm.
It's a rare week when we don't have an
Right.
infant baptism.
Right.
And when we ask the parents to take covenant vows, they commit to bring this child up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And then the last question, we turn to the congregation and say, do you commit? Do you promise to aid these parents in the Christian nurture of this child? And the whole congregation says, amen.
Amen.
Well, one of the things that means is that we are dedicated to no child in our congregation is, we don't want any child in our congregation to not get a Christian education because of money.
Right.
Right.
There you
So
go.
we have a Christian education fund where we help parents with homeschooling materials. We help parents with Christian school tuition. We are committed as a body
Mhm.
to the nurture of these covenant children. These are these
Providing the resources, the network, the whole thing for them. Yeah.
correct. Now, the other thing, this is a wonderful little happy spot for me. We just recently did some demographic digging with U.S. Census data
Yeah.
and Moscow school district enrollment numbers. And 5 years ago, 76% of the school-age children, 5 to 17, we didn't go up to 18 because there's the university year. And so 5 to 17 is the number we took. 76% of the kids in Moscow were in the government schools.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just note at the beginning that means 25% of them, 24% of them.
Twice the national average. Yeah, that's huge.
Weren't. All right.
Yeah.
Over the last 5 years, the current percentage of kids in the government schools in Moscow is 59%.
Wow.
Okay. Now
you're almost you're going to be the majority.
Yeah, we're getting to the inflection point or the tipping point where I hope before the Lord calls me home, I will be able to see in Moscow government school education dropping below the 50%.
Yeah, in the minority.
And this is God's grace to us. This is God's goodness. But what it means is we have in our churches, we have hundreds of school-age kids, lots and lots of them. If you got down on one knee after a church service and looked across, there's a whole new population down there.
I don't have to get down on one knee, Pastor Doug. I'm 5'5". They're my people. I love them.
All right. Well, we realized just over 40% of our congregation is age 14 and under. Yeah. And we have over 300 students in our community of churches that are 5 and under. Wow. And so, and all those kids weren't in that demographic. They're going to move into the school age quadrant. Well, this makes a potent difference. What it boils down to is we have virtually no children in our community of churches who are in the government school system. Right. And it's not because we made a legalistic rule, thou shalt not. That's not what we did. We just have a pro-family, pro-children. Yeah.
It wasn't negative freedom. It was positive freedom. Here's a vision for it. It was so enamoring and so beautiful. They went with it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a get to, not a got to. Yeah. And so when you live that way, that sort of thing is potent. And of course, we have to put up with all kinds of stories that circulate. We're the rich prep school, and we're no, these are just regular American families that are sold out to God, to Jesus, and to their kids.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing, Pastor Wilson. I mean, my 76 to 59% in just a few years. It's Eric Kaufman of the University of London. He did that study, Shall the Religious Inherit the Earth? Mm-hmm. And he was, it's based on religious demographics versus secular. And yeah, he's predicting the secular population won't be more than about 13 or 15% of the national population by the end of the century, because it's just moving. Mm-hmm. They're just not having kids anymore, and they've no reason to repopulate. Whereas we are.
You can basically, secularism no longer has any kind of an eschatology. Right.
Right.
And you can tell when people have no hope.
Right.
They stop having kids.
Right. There you go.
Kids are a tangible expression of cultural hope.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully put. You just spoke at ACCS, Association of Classical Christian Schools annual conference. Again, like I say, I'm hearing it's becoming more and more international. Groups
Yes.
coming from all over Latin America, Europe. So this is a worldwide movement now.
It is.
And good job. See what you got to see what you started.
Yeah. As much as I would love to take credit for it, I would consider myself as a small rock at the top of the avalanche.
Oh, there you go. I love that, small rock. Well, you did. I mean, you're being humble, but you were obviously a huge part in this. Looking ahead, what is your vision for the future of American education? So, if the influence of figures like Weingarten are yesterday's news, they continue to wane. How can conservatives seize this moment to build an education system that prioritizes truth and wisdom and virtue for generations to come?
Right. My exhortation would be to start getting ready now, because there's a character in one of I read about in I read a reference to a character in one of Hemingway's novels where he's asked how he went bankrupt. And he said, well, first, very gradually, and then suddenly. Right. We're looking at, when we look at the educational system, we're looking at a bankrupt system.
Right.
And it's been going bankrupt gradually, steadily, inexorably. But there's coming a point where it's going to be suddenly.
Yeah.
Okay. And that sudden collapse is going to be going to catch a lot of people flat-footed.
Yeah.
And you'll see this with it's a black swan sort of event, keying off of Talib's insights, where let's say like when the Soviet Union collapsed, before it collapsed, for virtually the whole world, it was a monolithic forever thing.
Right.
The Soviet Union was here to stay. The Soviet Union was the future. A handful of people saw trouble.
Right.
But then when the trouble came, it went suddenly. And, I at the tail end of, in Gorbachev's, I don't know what to call it, administration,
tenure.
Tenure. There was that showdown between the Soviet Union and Boris Yeltsin.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And Boris Yeltsin was in a standoff. He was holed up in a house in a standoff with a nuclear power.
Right.
And so you have a Russian politician with an alcohol problem in a showdown with this Soviet nuclear power.
Yeah.
And Boris won.
Yeah.
Right. Or I think of Tiananmen Square Tank Man.
Yeah.
It's that moment. And that kind of moment where the Chi-Coms sort of quashed Tiananmen Square, but not the memory of it. Right. In Yeltsin's case, it was the old order was ready to go.
Yeah.
Now, bringing this back to the American education establishment, Trump, to his great credit, is resolved to eliminate the Department of Education. And I think that the discrediting that has happened is all softening everything up for the sudden collapse of everything. And Christian parents who have never thought about Christian education for their kids might be precipitated into it by the fact that there's no other option.
Right. Yeah. Well, oh, Lord, bring that day.
Yes.
Yeah, come, Lord, come for that day, for sure.
Yes.
So, Pastor Joe, we've got a number of links down below, but where can our viewers keep up with your work? Where do you want them to go?
The best place to go if they wanted to connect with all the things I'm involved with is my blog, which is dougwills.com. The name of the blog is Blog and Mayblog. And on the front page, if you unfold the front page, there's a portal to pretty much everything I'm involved with.
Awesome.
Logos School, New St. Andrews College, Canon Press, ACCS. There's a link all the way through to all of those things. So you would be pretty squared away if you go to that blog site.
And you have a new show, Man Rampant?
Yes, not quite new, but it's on Canon Plus, which is our streaming service,
Mm-hmm.
Canon Plus, and Man Rampant is now in its 7th season, and I interview people, and this last go round, it was interviewed Joel Salatin. Canon did a documentary on, interviewed Robert Netzley of Inspire Investing on ethical investing for Christians, things like
nice.
Sort of long form interviews.
Yeah, and the whole worldview from all sectors of life,
Right.
and the like. Yeah, very good. Gang, just all the links are down below. Absolutely go to DougWilth.com to find all these resources relating to classical education, theology. I believe the phrase is theology that bites back. It's
Yeah.
it's theology with teeth for sure. That's you'll find that out very quick. Brilliant stuff. Just click the links in the description below. It's amazing. I mean, it's not just changing lives, it's changing the world, and it just speaks for itself. So as always, Pastor Doug, it's just great chatting with you. Thank you for taking some time with us. It's always an honor.
Happy to do it. Thank you for the invitation, and really appreciate it.
Thank you. Also, we're not just fighting an information war. There is another war that's happening that many of us don't know about, and it's in your gut. There's a battle between good and evil bacteria going on inside you right now that can determine the health of the whole of your body. And here's how you're going to win that battle. Kimchi 1 from Brightcore Nutrition is the fermented superfood your body needs to arm the good guys with the right weapons to defeat the bad actors once and for all. All health starts in the gut. So putting the right fermented superfood in your gut improves every aspect of your health, your heart, your brain, even the quality of your skin and the growth of your hair. Containing over 900 strains of beneficial bacteria in each capsule, Kimchi 1 supports healthy digestion, fortifies your immune system, and helps detoxify your body. Kimchi has also been shown to reduce risk of obesity and promote smaller waistlines by curbing appetite and naturally boosting your metabolism. Kimchi 1 is all natural, non-GMO, dairy-free, gluten-free, and 100% made right here in the USA. Today, you can get an exclusive offer by clicking the link below. Just use code TURLEY for 25% off your entire order, or for an even better deal, call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your order and free shipping. Give them a call now at 888-897-0233. That's 888-897-0233. All right, it is hotline time, 717-844-5984. Just call into that number. You can leave a message. Please try to keep it within 30 seconds. It's a lot easier on our end. And if we like your question, we'll pick it out for either our Tuesday or Thursday night broadcast. So let's hear, I think we have one major one. I think it's a little bit on the long side, but let's hear what it has to say there, Micah.
Hey, California here. Colleges and universities seem to be full of communist professors and teachers. How do we get these nuts out of our teaching facilities so we can return our youth to respecting our country the way it should be? I was in college in the 1980s, and it was very prevalent. They were teaching us to hate America. Thank you, Dr. Steve. We love you. Bye-bye.
Well, I love you too. Thank you so much. Well, hopefully you saw the interview there with Pastor Doug Wilson, because that's the answer. We didn't get into it, but in Moscow, Idaho, they also started New St. Andrews Classical College, which is just growing by leaps and bounds, and it's one of the most prestigious places to study in the nation, if not the world. And there were a number of other honors colleges, classical colleges that are popping up here or there. I guess you have the Austin University with people like Jordan Peterson. And then the University of Florida, though, that's going through some kind of weird thing going on with a possibly next president coming in who's a bit woke, or don't know too much of it. Can't talk to that. Yeah, I mean, our universities, they basically went woke starting in the 1930s, as I understand it. And it started with a massive push of secularization, and where scientific rationalism became, for the elite, sort of the one size fits all true way of understanding the world. That started in the 19th century in terms of making its way into our cultural institutions, but it really starts taking off in the 20th. And then they tried to replace the religious values that underpinned what we call the liberal arts, liberal not in the bad L, not like a Democrat liberal in the sense of literally liberated from our ignorance, liberated from the cultural residues of sin, and being able to be a true human, being educated rightly, and it's centered around wisdom and virtue. Well, they replaced that with things like sports, sports spirit, team spirit. And that's when you start to see the birth of all these great sports teams associated with particular universities, most particularly like Southern football universities and the like. And then in the 1950s and 60s, the Frankfurt School came in, starting with Columbia University. And these are the cultural Marxists that came from Europe. And they just infested the university with what we call critical theory, which is a very radicalized skepticism of anything and everything in our culture and our society as nothing more than, well, for the original Marxists, nothing more than that which benefits the bourgeois, the rich and the powerful, at the expense of the working class. But for the cultural Marxists, it's benefiting the first world at the expense of the third world. And the first world was symbolized by the white European, particularly the white European male. And so that's when you began seeing white male Christians as the perpetual boogeyman, and the non-white third world, non-Christian, and then all kinds of gender and sexual identities as being the perpetual hero, object of veneration, sanctity, and so on. And our universities are just cesspools of that today. And because of, as I understand, the GI Bill after World War II, most people didn't go to college back in the day, whereas with the GI Bill, they tried to get everybody there. And so this cultural Marxism ended up becoming sort of a circulatory system in the university that everybody was going to, and then it started making its way and becoming normalized in wider society. Now, the good news, as you heard from Pastor Doug, is it's beginning to wane. It's beginning to fall apart. Absurdity just ends up becoming absurd and just destroys itself. And so, as are our universities. And so I think President Trump is doing a great job at taking on these universities, making sure that through the pressure of withholding funds from them, particularly federal funds, that they're going to stop the wokeness. They're going to stop a lot of the absurdity. But again, we have a long way to go, because the worldview that's in place there, that's entrenched in there, is very secular, very liberal, and it's going to take some time before those universities are brought to heel, and we see a kind of transformation of those universities back to the original vision. If I recall, 114 of the original 118 colleges in our country were all Christian colleges. They were all started in some way, shape, or form overtly as Christian institutions. So we're going to go back to that eventually, but it's going to take some time. And until then, you have places like New St. Andrews and a number of schools, Hillsdale and so forth, that are very good, conservative, alternatives to the rampant secular woke mess that we see characterizing so many universities today. All right, with that, I think that is our only one, correct? All right, Micah, I think our producer, yeah, the silence tells me that it is. All right, guys. Very good to see everyone here on our live stream broadcast. I will be here bright and early tomorrow morning, just more content all week long, so stay tuned to the Turley Talks channel as we help you to understand how you are changing the world in ways you never even imagined.